I got pregnant with the president's husband's child. Demand anything as much as you want." Upon hearing Kathy's words, Lawyer Harris and I exchanged glances. What exactly did Kathy just say? The president's husband. Didn't she mention that? Kathy, still wearing a smirk full of malice, looked at our faces. I had thought she was strange for a while, but had she finally lost her mind? Or was she hiding something even more outrageous than she had done? Huh? You know the president is your sister, right? Instead of me, who was stunned, Lawyer Harris spoke up. At first, I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words. But after seeing Kathy's reaction to what Lawyer Harris said, I began to put the pieces together. What? Upon hearing Lawyer Harris's words, Kathy's expression froze instantly. I never thought that Daniel would be so pathetic, pretending to be the president. Believing that, Kathy married Daniel. He was good at lying. Daniel must have explained things to Kathy in a way that made her misunderstand who the president of the company where Daniel and I worked was. It must have been the only way he could get close to a beauty like Kathy. Now, I understood why Kathy married Daniel so easily. But let's go back. Yes. I am undoubtedly the president of this company. My name is Tracy Norman. I am a 37-year-old single woman working in IT, living alone for various reasons. I have an older sister named Kathy. As a family member, I must say she is quite beautiful. Since childhood, we weren't close as sisters. When I saw my friends' kind older sisters, I always felt envious. Kathy, perhaps because of her beauty, was always pampered and adored. Perhaps because of this, Kathy grew up to be cunning and unpleasant. Even when she did something wrong, it was common for her to skillfully blame me, which was terrifyingly efficient. As far as I remember, Kathy was never scolded by our parents, saying, "You're the older sister." She was faithful to her desires and perfectly played the role of the kind sister in front of our parents. Although our parents never blatantly compared our looks, relatives and others did. The words, "Your sister is so beautiful," left a mark on my young mind. And since then, I've been tormented by a sense of inferiority. When we were in middle school, boys who found Kathy too intimidating would come looking for me, her sister. And they would invariably say, "Oh, the sister isn't cute at all." Kathy found this amusing, enjoying her further glorification. I was troubled by the surrounding views, but I knew Kathy's true nature. I understood better than anyone that she was a person with a beautiful appearance but shallow inside. Eventually, Kathy will hit a dead end. Believing this, I started to focus on my studies. I didn't know how long it would take, but I was convinced that our positions would reverse someday. From then on, I consistently topped my classes in middle and high school. I grew bored of what was taught in school and decided to learn about computers. Looking ahead to the future. Despite opposition, I chose to go to a vocational school. I was confident in my knowledge of general subjects. Therefore, I wanted to focus intensively on my studies. I easily got into vocational school. Perhaps because it was a school for studying computers, I made many like-minded friends there. They were all what you'd call a geeks, and I fit in well with them. During that time, I was able to learn a lot about web design, site construction, programming, and more. After graduating, I moved between several companies. But now I work with Sean Manning, a classmate from the vocational school. Sean was not only a good friend during our school days, but also an excellent programmer. After moving through several companies like me, we ended up working together. Several years into working at the same company, I started dating a man named Daniel Reynolds. Daniel seemed experienced with women, knowing exactly how to make them happy. I observed him speaking with other female employees, tailoring his approach to each woman's type. I was inexperienced with men and shy, but Daniel, being 3 years older, led the way, and we started dating. Daniel, who worked in sales, was charming and popular with women. I never thought he would be interested in someone like me and had reservations about such men. However, Daniel managed to soften my heart and found his way in. Only a few people at work knew about my relationship with Daniel, and we tried to keep personal matters out of the workplace. Still, I often found myself favoring Daniel inadvertently. When Daniel made mistakes at work, I naturally covered for him, to the point where Sean pointed it out. I knew this wasn't right, but being in love for the first time, I was undoubtedly over my head. When our relationship passed the 3-year mark, Daniel proposed to me. I never expected things to go so smoothly, and my parents were equally surprised by the news. I had always been focused on studies and work, with no interest in men. The fact that I got engaged before Kathy, my sister, made them very happy. On the day we introduced Daniel to my family, including my sister Kathy, they unexpectedly hit it off. Since they were going to be relatives, it seemed like a good thing. However, this was my naivety and my biggest mistake. Despite knowing Kathy for years, I let my guard down, everything going so well. Soon after, Daniel broke off our engagement. The reason was an engagement with Kathy. I never trusted Kathy completely, but I never imagined such a thing would happen in reality. The thought of a sister stealing one's fiancé seemed like a plot from a comic book or TV show. Not something that would happen to me. But now, it was my reality. Later, I found out that Daniel had been flirting with many female employees at the company. It was only natural for someone like Daniel, who was interested in appearances, to fall for a beautiful woman like Kathy. My parents were appalled by Kathy and Daniel's audacity. To think they would snatch the fiancé of their own daughter. If relatives or acquaintances found out. Despite being spoiled as a child, this was unforgivable. Both my father and mother vehemently scolded Kathy, but she wouldn't listen. Simultaneously, unsettling rumors started at my company. The rumor was that Daniel had been deceived and dumped by me. Thinking such a ridiculous rumor would never be believed, I arrogantly ignored it. But somehow, the company started sympathizing with Daniel. Not realizing my character, Daniel used me and then got close with sympathetic female employees. He betrayed me, engaged with Kathy, and continued his affairs. Everyone initially tried not to fall for Daniel's talk, but eventually, they were deceived. The company's view of me turned cold, and Daniel disrupted the workplace's morale. Kathy and Daniel later held a grand wedding, ignoring the feelings of my parents and me. They even sent me an invitation, but of course, I didn't attend. Although my parents intended to keep Kathy's actions secret, the invitations were sent to relatives too. Ashamed by their daughter, my parents wept, saying it was disgraceful, and declared they would have nothing more to do with them. Sometime later, Kathy became pregnant and even came to tell me in person. How does it feel? Your ex-boyfriend and your sister's child are here. What are your thoughts? Tell me. Kathy, holding her belly as if it were something precious, looked at me with a smirk. It seemed she found pleasure in thoroughly tormenting and breaking my spirit. Her eyes gleamed with a genuine enjoyment of the situation. Realizing that someone related to me by blood could be filled with such madness, I was struck by nothing but fear. The feeling of fear spread in my heart, overpowering any sense of anger. I stood there, unable to say anything, just facing Kathy. Whether she grew bored or satisfied with the situation, Kathy eventually left without saying a word. She, along with Daniel Reynolds, will probably continue to torment me. Ever since the breakup with Daniel, I've been sinking deeper into darkness. Unable to confide in anyone. I desperately wanted to keep personal issues out of my work, but gradually, my body wouldn't move as I wished. No. There's nothing wrong with my body, but my mind refuses to function. I don't want to think about anything anymore. It felt like I could hear the screams inside my heart, and I was unable to go to work for a while. After a few days, I finally managed to check the numerous missed calls on my phone. Most of them were from my parents and Sean. I had sent emails to report my absence, but it was only one-way communication from my side. And I hadn't been able to explain it in detail to Sean. The thought that my absence might be causing problems at work made my heart shrink even more. Along with the missed calls, there were several messages from Sean. What happened? I'm here to listen, and so on. None of Sean's messages mentioned work. They were all out of concern for me. I thought I had no one to consult with and that no one was on my side. But realizing that someone cared about me like this, tears naturally flowed from my eyes. I can't go on like this. I decided to shake off the fog in my heart and contact Sean. If I continue like this, I will be playing right into Kathy and Daniel's hands. When I finally came to my senses and looked around, my room was filled with trash from instant noodles and snack bread. This is terrible. First, I need to clean this up. I muttered to myself and began tidying up the messy room. What happened? The moment he saw me, Sean expressed his concern. After cleaning my room, I called Sean. I want to meet and talk. I sought his help. It was already past 10 p.m., but Sean readily agreed. At his first words, I involuntarily stroked my hair. Was my appearance that bad because I was in a hurry? Despite the situation, I couldn't help worrying about unnecessary things. Sean said, "Let's go inside first," and guided me into the cafe where we had agreed to meet. The cafe was almost empty, seeming like a good place for a calm conversation. We ordered coffee and began talking right away. I talked about what had happened in the past few days. How I felt out of place at work because of the rumors Daniel had spread. Once I started, the words just flowed out non-stop. Sean listened to everything without interrupting, taking my story seriously. After I finished speaking and sipped my coffee, Sean said, "First, about the office situation, you don't have to worry at all. All of Daniel's lies have been exposed. His repeated affairs at the office, without leaving anything out." Sean said this with a smile. It was hard to believe that Daniel would admit to lying, so what exactly had happened? Also, don't worry. I haven't spoken a word about your personal matters. I was stunned, and Sean added that. But that's not what I mean. What happened? Sean nodded several times as if he understood my confusion. Why do you think the female employees discarded by Daniel didn't say anything? Sean's tone became more serious, and he posed a question to me. As I tilted my head, he continued. He was threatening the women, saying they knew he was married and would get sued if they spoke out. In other words, he was saying that if they talked about their relationship, his wife would sue them. It's no wonder young women would be terrified when told such things by Daniel. Daniel exploited these women's fears to repeatedly cheat on them. Unforgivable. My fist clenched on the table, involuntarily tightening with anger. But Daniel got too cocky. The female employees, deceived by Daniel, didn't speak up on their own. However, they were quick to sense that there were others who had been involved with Daniel. Was it a woman's intuition? They realized the truth through the subtle tension in the air between them and Daniel. United, these women were formidable. Eventually, several victims reported Daniel's misdeeds to Sean. We were deceived and threatened by this Daniel Reynolds. On the morning of the company-wide meeting, the women deceived by Daniel spoke up in front of everyone, causing a stir among all the employees. They're just lying because they're upset about being dumped. Please believe me. I haven't done anything wrong. Despite being accused by everyone, Daniel shamelessly continued to lie. But who would believe him, seeing the women tearfully pleading their case? Taunts began to fly from the crowd at Daniel's pathetic excuses. He hid the fact that he was married and had an affair with me. He's the worst kind of cheater. The victims, not accepting Daniel's denial, became more heated. Sean, without trying to stop them, watched Daniel being denounced for a while. Hiring someone like you was the biggest stain on my career. You can't even do your job properly, and on top of that, you do such despicable things. I've reported your crimes to the police, so be prepared. Sean, usually mild-mannered, let out his anger quietly. Sean's rage not only shocked Daniel but also sent shivers down the spines of all the employees. Also, you're fired. You bragged about being good at sales. But compared to the other employees, you were by far the worst. Just thought I'd let you know that for your future reference. After adding that, Sean announced the end of the morning meeting. The employees dispersed like scattering spiders, leaving Daniel alone. His pride was completely shredded in front of all his colleagues. So, that's why I fired Daniel in front of everyone yesterday. I hope I didn't overstep by not consulting you first. Sean waited for my reaction, but it seemed like he already knew what I would say. Daniel was exposed in front of all employees for having affairs and threatening multiple female staff. It must have been embarrassing for the victims to come forward. But they came up with this plan to humiliate Daniel. It was quite a scene. Sean continued with a wry smile. But that's not all, the victims aren't just letting it go. They're demanding a hefty sum for damages and have reported the threats to the police. While I was feeling down, Daniel was completely knocked down. So, I wanted to ask you, why don't you let the lawyer handling this case? Lawyer Harris, take care of your sister, Kathy and Daniel? I nodded vigorously at Sean's suggestion and decided to join the female employees in suing Daniel and Kathy. A few days after discussing with Sean, I met Kathy in the presence of Lawyer Harris, whom Sean had introduced to me. Following Sean's suggestion, we decided to sue Kathy and Daniel separately. First, it was about my personal grievance. Kathy stealing my fiancé. Kathy, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, looked blissfully happy. And her gaze towards me seemed even more delighted than before. Kathy, facing me confidently, seemed unaware of her position as the accused. This was the first encounter for Lawyer Harris with Kathy, and he looked at her with a puzzled expression before starting the conversation. Excuse me, but do you understand why you're being sued by your sister? Without beating around the bush, Lawyer Harris asked directly. Indeed, I too found Kathy's confidence eerie. I understood she was gloating over looking down on me. But she couldn't keep laughing for long, considering what was to come. When Lawyer Harris spoke, Kathy, for some reason, began speaking in an excessively sarcastic tone. I got pregnant with the president's husband's child. Demand anything as much as you want. Lawyer Harris and I exchanged glances, shocked by Kathy's unexpected words. What exactly did Kathy just say? The president's husband. Didn't she mention that? Kathy, still smirking sarcastically, looked at our faces. I had thought she was strange before, but had she finally lost her mind? Or had she done something even more outrageous that she was hiding from me? The president is your sister, right? Lawyer Harris spoke up, taking me aback. At first, I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words. But after seeing Kathy's reaction to what Lawyer Harris said, I began to put the pieces together. What? Kathy's expression froze instantly upon hearing Lawyer Harris's words. Yes, Daniel had been pretending to be the president. I knew he was a despicable person, but I never imagined he was this terrible. Kathy married Daniel, believing his lies. Daniel was good at lying. He must have explained things to Kathy in a way that made her misunderstand who the president of the company where Daniel and I worked was. It must have been the only way he could get close to a beauty like Kathy. Now, I understood why Kathy married Daniel so easily. But let's go back. Yes. I am undoubtedly the president of this company. Sean Manning and I co-founded this company. And Daniel was just a trainee employee with little knowledge. Sean, as the vice president, has been supporting me. I later found out that Daniel wanted my position as the president and was engaged to me for that reason. Not just the position, but he was also after my wealth. Controlling a company with an annual turnover of $300 million. Kathy's appearance must have been unexpected for Daniel. But he was instantly captivated by her beauty. Kathy cleverly misunderstood the president as Daniel when she heard us together. Taking advantage of that, Daniel deceived Kathy and even had a child with her. Knowing Daniel was a worthless person, the thought of having dated him, even for a moment, sent shivers down my spine. And I was furious at myself for not seeing his true nature. To satisfy his desires, he lied about his identity and even fathered a child. Unaware of this, Kathy was overjoyed, thinking she had hit the jackpot. However, I have no sympathy for Kathy, even though she's my blood sister, who was deceived by Daniel. You seem to be under a misconception, but as you said, the compensation will indeed be quite substantial. Upon hearing Lawyer Harris's words, Kathy's strength seemed to drain from her body, and she slumped in her chair. Lawyer Harris, concerned about her pregnancy, instinctively reached out to support Kathy. It's unfortunate for the child, but it's your own doing. This is the result you brought upon yourself. Kathy looked at me as if she wanted to say something, but I firmly told her that knowing the truth doesn't mean I'm going to back down or forgive her. Ignoring Kathy's desperate attempts to cling to me, I asked Lawyer Harris to proceed with the procedures. Tracy. Please, I was deceived. I've done nothing wrong. Help me. Kathy's anguished cries echoed in Lawyer Harris's law office. Once Kathy realized that Daniel was not the president, but just a trainee employee, she furiously blamed him. How dare you deceive me? Just because you're a bit popular, you got carried away. Without money, you're worthless. Don't ever show me your pathetic face again. Kathy, who learned about Daniel's affairs with other female employees, filed for divorce. Furthermore, she also demanded compensation from Daniel. With the victim's accusations of Daniel's threats, he was convicted. On top of that, he faced massive compensation claims from several people. Unsurprisingly, Daniel faced financial ruin. Until his sentence was over, Daniel's parents had to shoulder the compensation payments to us. Daniel's parents, once related to us, took this action as an act of penance. For us, it was the only consolation. As a result, Daniel was disowned by all his relatives, including his parents. Even after Daniel Reynolds completes his sentence and returns to society, that will only be the beginning of his real hell. He'll have to spend the rest of his life bearing the burden of his crimes, continually paying compensation and child support. After the situation with Daniel had settled, I sincerely apologized to the victims. I told them how I had been deceived by Daniel too, and that my naivety had led them to suffer as well. However, not one of them blamed or resented me. We were all victims, and they saw no fault in me. Hearing this, I felt ashamed of myself. I had brought personal issues into the company, secluded myself because of my own troubles, and let Daniel run rampant. I was grateful to my subordinates for forgiving me and decided to get my act together. And I couldn't thank Sean enough for handling these troubles alone while I was absent. Initially, Sean was worried about my relationship with Daniel. but he was very happy when we got engaged. Despite not listening to his advice about dating Daniel and everything turning out like this, Sean never blamed me. On the contrary, he took care of the victim's mental well-being. It made me realize that Sean, more than me, the president, was truly capable. Yet, Sean always encouraged me, saying, "The company can't function without you." As for Kathy, Daniel's ex-wife, she was in a dire situation, no better than Daniel. Shortly after, she gave birth to Daniel's child. The reason I know about Kathy's childbirth is that she has repeatedly come to my house seeking support. "Tracy, you're my sister, right? This child, your nephew? Don't you feel anything when you see this child?" Kathy would show the child to the intercom camera at my apartment entrance, pleading for help. I had to harden my heart and deny her entry beyond the entrance, even reporting her to the building's security. It's frankly a nuisance that she keeps coming here like this. Naturally, Kathy has also repeatedly turned to our parents for help, but they firmly refuse her. Even when shown their grandchild, their resolve not to forgive Kathy seems unwavering. I also learned for the first time that Kathy had hardly ever worked before. She had been living off various men's support, using her beauty as a weapon. Suddenly thrown into society with almost nothing, Kathy could no longer expect the same kind of support, especially now with a child. Unforgivingly, all those men have deserted her. Kathy, now a single mother, has to work for her living expenses and the compensation she owes me. It pains me to think of the child, but Kathy has no choice but to work from now on. Given how she has looked down on people and been pampered all her life, the harshness she will face is unimaginable. Watching my sister being escorted away by the security guard, I turned off the intercom camera. Having settled down, I invited Sean to dinner to express my gratitude. As far as I know, Sean isn't seeing anyone, but considering the recent turmoil, I couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Sean accepted my invitation without hesitation, despite my worries. We have talked several times at work since then, but we never brought up the topic of the incident. Sean must have been considerate of my feelings, as he deliberately avoided mentioning Daniel. Sean also efficiently handled the aftermath of Daniel's actions and took care of the affected employees. I intended to express my gratitude to Sean for everything, including dealing with Daniel. "I'm really sorry for not listening to your advice about Daniel. It was the biggest stain on my life." I meant to thank him, but what came out were words of apology. As Sean said in front of all the employees, my involvement with Daniel was the biggest blot on my life. I felt like I had no face to show to Sean, who had never trusted Daniel from the beginning. As I lowered my head, Sean slowly began to speak. "Let's leave that man in the past. You're a victim and did nothing wrong. And he's receiving his punishment, bearing his sins for life." Sean frowned as if even mentioning Daniel's name was distasteful. Indeed, as Sean said, Daniel is unlikely to ever lead a normal life again, given what he has to face. I took Sean's words to heart and nodded solemnly. If it weren't for Sean, I wouldn't have been able to recover. And those girls who were deceived would have continued to suffer without any help. "Thank you for everything, truly." I bowed my head to Sean again, expressing my deepest gratitude. Watching me, Sean let out a deep sigh. "Ever since our student days, you've never listened to my advice. It's always been like that." As he cut his steak with a knife, Sean muttered with a hint of irony, "We've known each other for a long time. Isn't it about time you trusted me more?" He tossed a piece of cut meat into his mouth and stared at me intently. "Yes. You're right." Feeling the sting of his words, I found myself unable to argue. "Am I just a business partner to you?" he asked suddenly, looking at me, whose face still lowered. Not knowing his intention, I hastily replied, "Of course not. We may not be friends, but we have an inseparable relationship. Despite my hasty denial, I found myself confused about what I wanted to say. With what happened this time, it's clear that you're too vulnerable to be left alone. Huh? I exclaimed in surprise at Sean's words. Tracy. I want to date you. Cutting off the flow of our conversation, Sean said this to me with a very serious expression. Sean has always been like this, lecturing me and then suddenly shifting gears. A serious and talented engineer, but sometimes oblivious to the atmosphere. At Sean's words, I burst into laughter, almost hysterical. My laughter echoed inappropriately in the quiet restaurant. Feeling the eyes of others, I cleared my throat to calm down. You say that now? At my calm remark, Sean's face turned red. However, I was pleased by his feelings. Despite having witnessed everything with Daniel, he still liked me. Of course, I liked Sean as a business partner, but I realized I also had feelings for him. I had always thought it was just affection as a friend. It was rude and presumptuous of me not to think deeply about it until Sean brought it up. At my age, I laughed out of embarrassment and fear of openly accepting Sean's feelings. Are you sure about me? After everything that's happened? I couldn't boldly affirm and instead asked back. Without hesitation, Sean replied. That's a silly question. Thus, Sean and I became partners, both professionally and personally. It's embarrassing, considering I just vowed not to mix business with personal matters. But I know better than anyone that Sean is trustworthy. My life was ruined by Daniel and Kathy, but as a result, I was connected with Sean. I have no intention of forgiving those two, but for me, now happy, it doesn't matter anymore. It's best to quickly forget about such people. With our life experiences, Sean and I will surely take the company to greater heights. From now on, I vow to listen more to Sean's opinions and move forward together.